The morning sun peeked softly through the window, casting a warm glow on Malcolm's neat kitchen, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of vanilla from the candles Keisha had lit earlier. It was a quiet start to what promised to be a busy day, and Malcolm moved through his routine with practiced ease, eager to support his wife as they prepared for the big launch event that evening. He wanted everything to go smoothly, to stand beside her and share in their success. Yet, as Keisha insisted on taking her car instead of riding with him, a small flicker of unease niggled at the back of Malcolm's mind. Something about her tone, the way she glanced at her phone with a hurried, secretive look, felt off, but he brushed it aside, attributing it to nerves. When he questioned her gently, she offered a quick smile and a reassurance that everything was fine, that she just needed a bit of space to gather her thoughts. And so he nodded, accepting her explanation, trying not to read too much into her distant attitude. Still, as she hurried out the door, clutching her purse tightly and whispering hurriedly into her phone, Malcolm couldn't help but notice the subtle signs, her quick, clipped responses, the way she kept glancing over her shoulder that hinted something was amiss. The day stretched before him with a quiet, growing tension, and an unsettling question lingered in his mind. Was her secrecy merely nerves, or was it something more? As he watched her drive away, her hurried departure cloaked in shadows of doubt, Malcolm felt a quiet shift inside him, a sense that beneath the normalcy of their routine lurked an undercurrent of betrayal waiting to surface, casting a faint but persistent shadow over the unfolding day. Malcolm had never forgotten the gentle hush of that first morning in their shared apartment, when sunlight slipped through lax curtains and painted the faded wallpaper in soft gold, and he sat across from Keisha at a tiny round table, their steaming mugs of coffee sending thin white ribbons of warmth into the air as they spoke in hushed tones about the life they would build together. He thought back to the way she had traced the chipped rim of her cup with a slender finger, her dark curls tumbling against her shoulder as she laughed at something he'd said, her eyes glowing with unspoken promise. In those early days, the city felt like their secret playground. Hand in hand, they wandered crowded markets seeking exotic spices, stood shoulder to shoulder on the subway as the world rushed by, and whispered dreams through half-light before drifting into sleep, their hearts echoing with shared hope. He had been fresh out of college, eager to carve his path in journalism, and she, newly graduated with honors, had talked excitedly of law school, her passions unfurling like a banner in the wind. They moved into that cramped one-bedroom apartment because it was affordable, and every scuffed floorboard, every whisper of draft through the window became a testament to their commitment, a humble stage on which they performed the quiet marvel of beginnings. Malcolm remembered the wedding as a blur of white flowers and warm applause, the brief flicker of forever in everyone's eyes, and the way she pressed her cheek into his chest as they danced slowly beneath strings of twinkling lights, a world away from all that noise, where only their breathing mattered. His pride in her was immense, like a steady drumbeat beneath his ribs, for she had shone with unwavering determination, earning scholarships and climbing every rung of her chosen path, her brilliance heralded by mentors and colleagues alike. And while her star ascended, Malcolm hewed steadily to his modest newsroom, chasing local stories of community gardens and school fundraisers, finding meaning in the faces he could lift with his words, even if the paycheck never matched Keisha's burgeoning salary. Yet as her success grew, subtle fissures began to appear in the bright facade of their marriage. He found her leaning back on the couch late at night, her laptop glowing on her knees, while she tapped away at briefs, frowning into the silence. And when he asked her to join him for dinner, she would look up with a tired smile and murmur that she needed just a few more minutes. He told himself she was just ambitious, driven by the same fire that had first captivated him, but a quiet unease settled in his chest alongside pride. He noticed the way her phone would buzz in her purse during a quiet Sunday brunch, and how she'd slip out to take calls on the balcony, pressing one hand against the sleek railing, shoulders hunched as she spoke in soft, urgent tones. The first time he asked her who she was talking to, she glanced at him with startled eyes, her fingers still poised over the screen, and offered a gentle excuse about a colleague who needed assistance. He accepted it then, trusting the warmth in her voice as he had so many times before. Yet each excuse planted a seed of doubt that grew quietly beneath his calm. There were mornings when he would wake to find her side of the bed cold, and her perfume lingering in the air like a distant echo. He would sit up, tracing her pillow with his fingertips, recalling the small pattern of pastel flowers she had chosen, now pressed flat by her absence. At the kitchen counter, he discovered receipts for dinners at upscale restaurants that he had never heard her mention, and the delicate remains of a lipstick stain on a napkin tucked into her jacket pocket. He rationalized that legal firms had client dinners, that she deserved the occasional treat after long hours. But late at night, when the apartment was thick with silence, he would catch his own reflection in the dark window, eyes wide with questions he had not yet voiced. He longed to believe that success had not changed her, that the woman who once confided every trivial frustration was still the same partner he had pledged his life to. That day they exchanged vows. And yet the laughter he heard through the thin wall of her study late on a Tuesday, the way she traced patterns in the wood grain of her desk when she thought he wasn't looking, and the murmur of her voice, warm and intimate, over the phone made him hesitate before he asked for explanations. In those moments, pride and unease intertwined in his chest, a bittersweet knot that reminded him how deeply he cared and how precarious trust could be. Beneath his calm exterior, he wrestled with questions about ambition and loyalty, wondering whether their paths, once so perfectly aligned, had begun to diverge under the weight of new responsibilities and hidden encounters. And as he set aside another half-finished article to peer down the hallway at a room he had once thought was a sanctuary, his thoughts drifted to the gala scheduled for the coming Saturday, the one where Keisha would be honored by her peers and where he, clad in a rented tuxedo, planned to rise in the back row and applaud her as though she were still the eager bride he married, even as he nursed the unspoken fear that their differing plans for the evening might chart the course of a night that would change everything. That morning, Malcolm woke in the pale light spilling through the drapes of the suite's tall windows and felt the familiar tremor of nerves that always came before a life-changing event. He sat up on the edge of the bed, ran a hand through his hair, and glanced over at the half-finished article on the desk, but his thoughts were already leaping ahead to the gala that evening, the one where Keisha was to be honored by her peers and where he planned to cheer her on as though she was still the eager bride he had fallen for, though his heart quivered with the unspoken fear that her agenda might be pulling them in opposite directions. In the bathroom, the mirror's cool glow reflected a man intent on doing everything right. He smoothed his tie, examined the crisp line of his collar, and practiced the confident smile he would wear when he stepped into the ballroom. But each time he tried it, he felt the weight of uncertainty tug at its corners. Downstairs, the lobby of the hotel shone with marble floors that echoed the click of polished shoes and chandeliers, dripping with crystal prisms that seemed to catch every flicker of morning sun in 1,000 shifting rainbows. Jaden, their 10-year-old son, stood by the concierge desk in his tiny suit, eyes shining with a mixture of excitement and something more somber, as though he understood that this gala was not only about celebrating his mother's success, but also about witnessing whether his parents could still stand side by side in the same moment. Malcolm approached them both, clearing his throat, and tried to sound casual as he asked whether they would drive together. Keisha, whose laughter usually felt like a warm embrace, tilted her head and said she preferred to arrive separately, that she had business to discuss en route and wouldn't want to hold them up. She placed her hand on Jaden's shoulder, smoothing down the lapel of his jacket with a tenderness that made Malcolm's chest tighten. And then she turned that same guiding kindness toward him, her voice soft yet firm, as if she was setting a course he could neither divert nor question. He swallowed his unease and nodded, nodding again when she promised she'd text her ETA. But as he watched her stride away toward the valet stand, her heels clicking on the marble, he felt a flicker of suspicion ignite like a stubborn spark in his mind. Jaden reached up to tug at his sleeve, voice barely above a whisper, saying he wished they could all go together, that it would feel safer that way. And Malcolm knelt to meet his gaze, brushing his son's cheek with a gentle finger and assuring him they were a team even if the cars were separate. Back in the suite, the air smelled of fresh lavender from the floral arrangement on the dresser, and Malcolm opened his laptop, watched his carefully edited slides come to life on the screen, and practiced the opening line of his presentation until his tongue felt numb. But each time he tried, he pictured the empty chair that would have held Keisha beside him, and the words slipped away. He reached for the mug of coffee on the bedside table, its warmth a small comfort, and remembered how, just hours before his wedding, he had slipped a note into her bouquet that said he would follow her anywhere. He wondered now whether she had misplaced that note or if she had tucked it away for a different journey. Jaden came in again, hair still damp from his quick shower, clutching a small guitar pick he planned to drop into her pocket later, a token of his pride, and spilled his worry about whether his parents might miss their cue, whether the vows they had never spoken might begin to fray at the seams once more. Malcolm tousled his son's curls and lifted him into his lap, feeling the boy's heartbeat against his chest, and quietly promised they would find each other at the end of the night no matter what came between them. By the time he pulled on his jacket and smoothed his suit one last time, the sun had climbed higher and the hotel corridors hummed with staff, arranging banquet tables and polishing silver trays for the launch party that would follow the gala. Malcolm checked his watch once, twice, and then closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling the scent of polished wood and expensive cologne lingering in the hallway. He straightened his shoulders, took his son's hand, and led him toward the elevators, each step echoing with possibilities that felt both thrilling and precarious. As the doors slid closed, sealing them in a sleek metal box ascending toward the bustle below, he realized that tonight would be more than a celebration of Keisha's professional triumph. It would be the quiet reckoning of a marriage caught between devotion and doubt, and he braced himself to navigate the evening alone if he had to, determined that whatever storm brewed behind her calm is the one he would meet head-on in the ballroom's glittering glare. When the elevator doors whispered open onto the grand foyer of the Ritz-Newcomb ballroom, Malcolm stepped out into a swirl of polished marble and hushed anticipation, every breath tingling with the scent of fresh orchids and the soft glow of crystal chandeliers reflecting off champagne flutes held by impeccably dressed guests. He paused for just a moment, smoothing the lapel of his tailored suit as he gazed at the stage draped in midnight blue velvet, where his name glowed in slender gold letters beyond the upturned heads of investors and colleagues alike. This had been his moment ever since he had poured late nights and restless weekends into perfecting the launch presentation for his cutting-edge analytics platform, the culmination of a dream he had nurtured through years of quiet struggle. Yet the familiar flutter of excitement in his chest was now laced with tension, because when he had opened his laptop backstage to run a final safety check, he had discovered files where none should be, files that threatened to transform his work into stolen code, his reputation into ruins. He remembered the sudden hunch that had led him to retreat to the dimly lit anteroom just minutes ago, the thrill of victory draining from his veins as he watched forged documents proliferate across his desktop, each one more damning than the last. He had closed the door behind him with a soft click, his fingers shaking as he accessed the system logs, heart pounding in concert with the faint staccato of his own rapid keystrokes. The The timestamps flickered like wilting fireflies, pinpointing a remote upload from his own home IP address at the precise hour when he was supposed to be on his way to this very event. It was a punch in the gut that left him reeling, eyes narrowing as he traced the digital breadcrumbs to a software license registered in the name of Darnell, the man standing just a few feet away on the ballroom floor, shaking hands and sharing laughs with potential backers as though he had no part in this betrayal. A cold fury rose inside Malcolm, tempered by the urgent need to protect not just his creation, but also the fragile trust he had in the people he loved. He swiped away a bead of sweat that had trailed down his temple, reminding himself to breathe, to stay calm, because every second counted now. Gathering the loose documents he had printed in haste, the yellow-stained pages trembling between his fingers, he slipped through the crowd, his polished shoes making no sound on the plush carpet, and found a discreet corner beneath a gilded pillar where he laid out proof of the sabotage, the forged contracts, the manipulated code snippets, the security logs that all pointed to a man he once called friend. His mind raced as he realized in a heartbreaking instant that this was more than a professional assault. This was a personal ambush orchestrated by Keisha and her new confidant, a scheme to frame him for intellectual theft just as he stood on the verge of triumph. The weight of that realization struck him like a physical blow. He felt his chest tighten, the soft rustle of evening gowns and murmured congratulations drifting past him as the ballroom's celebratory hum turned into a mocking echo. Yet beneath the sting of betrayal, a steady flame of resolve blazed to life. Malcolm straightened, his jaw firming as he closed his laptop with deliberate care, sealing each sheet of evidence in a thin leather portfolio whose brass clasp felt reassuringly solid against his palm. He made his way back toward the stage, weaving between clusters of well-wishers who patted him on the back, oblivious to the storm gathering behind his composed facade. With every step, he reminded himself that truth carried a weight no counterfeit claim could match, that the strength of his integrity would shine through any attempt to tarnish it. And just as the host signaled for him to take the podium, sharp voices at the entrance cracked through the polite chatter, the distinct authority of uniformed officers moving swiftly toward Darnell, their badges glinting under the chandelier light. He glimpsed confusion ripple across Keisha's face at the rear, the casual confidence in her gaze melting into panic as two officers spoke her name and announced an official inquiry into fraud. In that frozen heartbeat, Malcolm stood, with the leather-bound evidence at his side, the silent crowd parting to reveal the unfolding reckoning, and he knew that the real presentation had only just begun. In the hush that followed the courtroom's clamor, Malcolm guided Kayla and her advisors into a small conference room whose walls bore the soft glow of evening light filtering through grey blinds, and as the clicking of heels receded down the hall, he laid out a scatter of documents across the polished wooden table. Kayla sat with her shoulders hunched and eyes fixed on the wood grain, her fingers tracing invisible patterns in an effort to steady the tremors that had taken residence in her chest. The lead counsel, a composed woman with silver-streaked hair, offered a reassuring nod before sliding a thick envelope toward her, the seal already broken to reveal a stack of medical charts, lab reports, and immigration papers emblazoned with the logos of discreet clinics that existed on the edge of legality. Malcolm leaned forward, his own voice gentle yet firm, as he explained that every sample of tissue and blood drawn for Jaden's DNA had been cross-referenced with international databases. Kayla's breath caught when the report confirmed what she both feared and longed to believe. Those fragile lines of code finally matched her own, proving beyond doubt that Jaden was her biological son. The room seemed to tilt, the hum of the air conditioner growing louder in Kayla's ears as memories she had tried so hard to bury surfaced in painful clarity. Rooms bathed in fluorescent light, the whisper of nurses promising a new life for a future she barely understood, and then the nightmare of Keisha's betrayal, the sting of stolen identity and stolen years. She raised her head and met Malcolm's gaze, her eyes brimming with a mixture of relief and anguish as she dared to speak of the cruelty that had been masked as kindness. Keisha's scheme, they discovered, had involved an underground network of clinics that preyed on desperate women, using falsified consent forms and chemical cocktails designed to manipulate fertility, all headquartered in a maze of rented offices where no regulation dared to wander. Each record told a story of a broken promise, photographs of women waiting in sterile waiting rooms, hearts pounding with hope, only to emerge confused and mutilated by the realization that their own children had been claimed as someone else's prize. Kayla's voice trembled as she recounted being told that she was too ill to carry a child, then transported under sedation to an anonymous ward where tissues were harvested and legal documents signed with a pen dipped in deception. The advisors listened in solemn silence, taking notes on the exact names of lab technicians and floor managers, every detail to build an unshakable case. Malcolm felt the ache of indignation in his chest, his heart reaching out to the woman who had endured such violation, yet still found the courage to stand, her spirit unbowed despite the years of trauma. Another folder revealed a ledger of transactions, small payments to couriers, coded email addresses, shell companies set up to launder funds, evidence that Keisha's reach extended far beyond a single clinic, weaving through financial institutions and shady legal offices until the money trail nearly evaporated beneath layers of obfuscation. As the evening deepened and the city lights outside the window blinked to life, Kayla pressed her palm to the envelope, feeling the cool paper beneath her skin and, for the first time in a long while, tasting the possibility of justice. Then came the most daunting question, poised gently by Malcolm with a careful tenderness. Now that Jaden's true origins were undisputed, what would she want him to know? Kayla's eyes filled with tears as she considered the life he had built, the laughter he shared with his adoptive mother's children, the home that had nurtured him through scraped knees and first heartbreaks. She acknowledged her longing to reclaim him, to fill the gaps left by Keisha's lies, but also confessed a growing respect for the life he knew and the people who loved him. In that moment, she made a bold, fragile declaration. She did not seek to upend Jaden's world, but to become a part of it, to stand at the edges of birthday celebrations and school recitals, offering love unconditionally and truth when he was ready. Her voice, though soft, carried the steel of determination as she asked the legal team to draft an agreement that would grant her visitation and participation in decisions about his future, while preserving the stability he had found. Malcolm exhaled, feeling the tension ease as hope settled into the room like a gentle dawn. And as he glanced at Kayla's resolute profile, he realized that this choice, slow, respectful, and attuned to Jaden's needs, might be the most courageous step she had ever taken. The documents lay between them now as beacons of possibility, a roadmap to healing that honored the past without letting it define the horizon. And in the soft glow of that conference room, Kayla allowed herself to believe that family could be rebuilt, not from the ashes of deceit, but from the steady, compassionate work of truth. Several months into their new relationship, Malcolm and Kayla found themselves strolling through a quiet park, the late afternoon sun casting a warm golden hue over the winding paths and rustling leaves. The air was filled with a gentle hush, broken only by the distant chirping of birds and the soft crunch of gravel beneath their feet. Malcolm's heart fluttered with a mixture of hope and hesitation as he watched Kayla's face, illuminated by the soft glow of the setting sun, her eyes bright yet tinged with vulnerability. He had been holding back his feelings for weeks, unsure if rushing into love after the betrayals of the past was wise, if it was fair to either of them. His doubts clung stubbornly, making him pause every time he tried to speak, his words caught in his throat like a fragile bird. Kayla, sensing his hesitation, felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, her own heart pounding with a mixture of longing and fear, daring to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could forge something genuine amid the scars of previous wounds. Malcolm finally took a deep breath, his gaze meeting hers, and with a vulnerability that surprised even himself, he confessed, "Kayla, I've come to realize that I love you more than I ever thought I could after everything we've been through. I want to build a future with you, to be honest and open, to truly be a family if you'll have me." His words hung in the air, trembling with sincerity, and Kayla's eyes shimmered with tears of hope as she reached out to gently take his hand. Under the glow of a nearby streetlight, they shared a tender kiss, sealing their bond in that quiet moment of promise. Yet, even as they reveled in their newfound commitment, a quiet question lingered in Kayla's mind. What did the future hold? Was this love strong enough to withstand the challenges ahead, to blend their two families into one? They both knew that the road to a wedding and a new beginning would require patience, trust, and genuine effort. But in that moment, with their hearts intertwined and their love reaffirmed, they felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that their bond was rooted in something real and enduring. Years later, on a golden spring afternoon, Malcolm and Kayla gathered their circle of family beneath a blooming arbor of wisteria to mark their 10th wedding anniversary, and the gentle breeze carried hints of past storms and future promises as they settled into chairs lined with soft linen cushions. Guests had come bearing bouquets of wildflowers and plates piled with lemon bars and buttery scones, but Malcolm and Kayla's hearts carried something far more delicate, memories of the struggles they had faced and the resilience they had forged together. As laughter rippled through the garden and their children, now teenagers blossoming into young adults, wove between the tables, Malcolm glanced at Kayla and was suddenly struck by how those two curious eyes still shone with the same warmth that had drawn him to her years before. Kayla, smoothing a loose strand of her dark hair, closed her eyes for a moment and inhaled the scent of honeysuckle, remembering how, not long ago, a single envelope had arrived bearing news that threatened to crack the fragile peace they had worked so hard to build. The letter had come from the parole board, carrying word that Keisha, Kayla's sister, whose mistakes had once cast a deep shadow over their lives, was now eligible for release after serving her sentence. In the hush of that letter's arrival, Malcolm had felt the old questions surface. Could they trust this second chance? Would the wounds reopen if Keisha stepped back into their world? Yet on this bright afternoon, with children laughing at a nearby fountain and the sunlight dancing on the petals above, Kayla rose to read aloud the latest update she had downloaded on her phone. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke of the board's decision to grant Keisha supervised freedom, with the condition of regular check-ins and community support. And for a fleeting instant, the air felt too full of possibility and fear at once. Malcolm reached for her hand, recalling the day they had vowed to stand together through every challenge, but he could not deny the tender rush of relief that followed his pulse. Their youngest daughter, her hair pulled back in a loose braid, scampered over with 2 cups of iced tea, offering one to Kayla with a shy grin, as though sensing the gravity of the moment. At that small gesture of care, Kayla's eyes welled with gratitude, not merely for the tea, but for the journey that had led her here, from the days of sleepless nights haunted by guilt and regret, to this scene of gentle joy. She looked at Malcolm and allowed herself to acknowledge the truth she had fought to embrace. Forgiveness would not erase the pain of the past, but acceptance could lift its weight from their shoulders. As the sun drifted lower, casting long shadows under the old oak tree, Malcolm and Kayla shared a quiet nod, deciding that they would reach out to Keisha once she was settled, offering a cautious hand rather than a closed door, even though uncertainties lingered at the edges of their trust. Their son, now tall enough to catch the frisbee that soared through the air, turned toward them and laughed, and in his carefree voice they heard the echo of the healing that had taken root within their family. The evening chorus of crickets began its gentle swell, and guests rose to join them on the lawn for a final dance, ribbons twirling in the fading light. In that moment, Malcolm and Kayla felt the full weight of their love's triumph, a love tempered by truth, anchored in resilience, and blooming now like the wisteria overhead. As they clasped each other's hands and stepped into the hush of the first dance, they realized that the question of how fully to forgive might always linger, but they trusted their bond to guide them through every new chapter, embracing the here and now with hearts wide open.